was presented as a great success in the European Union, and the stereotype that has changed over a couple of years. I remember working as a minister for European matters, and then I saw this dissonance because I remembered a visit of Swedish politicians who said, "Minister, you need to help us because we don't have so much clout in the EU as Poland does." I remember the Swiss, when I was a member of European Parliament, looked at us and dealing with the economic crisis, and they asked me, "How do you manage so well? How come you do it?" So this was really a big shock for someone who remembered our situation before. I remember being young when my colleagues went to Sweden to pick up strawberries to make some money over holiday. So this stereotype has changed, and now it hurts us so much when we see that the work of so many governments, of so many politicians from different sides of a table has been wasted, and that today Poland is not in the heart of Europe and does not present active solutions. I do not want to extrapolate on that, because this is not the time for it, but let me relate to the changes. Poland today is 70% of EU GDP, so you have seen the video how Warsaw has changed. More than 40% of total investments in Warsaw have been provided by the EU, more than 17 billion euro. If not for the EU and EU funding, we wouldn't see all these great things, the Copernicus Center, the boulevards at the Vistula River, and maybe we would have some problems with the underground. So these investments have been co-funded by the European Union, and we must not forget about it. But the most important thing to me, as a citizen of Warsaw, so I can say it, these changes on daily basis, but when I come to any part of Poland, the localities I visited 20, 15, 30 years ago, it is incredible how Poland has changed. Every part of Poland has changed thanks to our EU membership. And when I see EU membership plaques, EU plaques, investment plaques, then I see that this investment was supported either by the Swiss, by the Norwegians, or by the EU. Obviously, all this success is to the Polish people, but without the European Union, we wouldn't be where we are right now. And when we present all these videos, when we look at how Poland has changed, when we look how Warsaw has changed, how beautiful it is right now thanks to EU funds, we start talking about money, but EU is not only about money. It is much more. It is our security, it is our place in Europe, it is the opportunity to travel freely across Europe. EU gives us so many rights as European citizens, common market, and first and most of all, the values we share. We right now are a part of Europe, and we share European values. We are leaders in many aspects, and we do not need to feel ashamed, but these values are extremely important, and the rule of law is extremely important right now. And what we share are common values, observance of law, and this is why these aspects are so important. We sometimes tend to forget why European Union is so important to us. But we remember about the importance of the European Union, and we know what the price we would pay if we wouldn't be a member of EU club. And we do not understand that if you leave EU, then you would be in the grey zone. And we have always pondered when we worked in the European Parliament, and when I talked to Jyrki Katainen, we wondered how to make people aware of the fact that we are a part of the European Union and that the European Union is important. And it is so important to emphasize this to the young people. And I remember that one of our friends, Mr. De Vido, the Minister of European Matters of Spain, he said, on the 9th of May, you should have Europe's Day, when on this day you just go back to 25 years ago. So borders in Europe, borders, customs controls, then problems with products, and if you imagine that you lack all the investments you have seen around, and if you imagine that the rule of law is not observed, and that all non-European values are predominant, then you cannot just imagine that, can you? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great speech. Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to our very special guest, Commissioner Katainen and President Kwaśniewski, and Anna Kalczyńska will moderate this debate. A big round of applause, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anna Kalczyńska. I'm very pleased to welcome you at the Copernicus Center. Just as a brief introduction, I will present the agenda for our debate. We are talking as part of a citizens' dialogue. This is the idea developed by Jean-Claude Juncker, whose mission and ambition was to bring Europe closer to people and bring European institutions closer to European citizens. This is why we want to hear your voice. We want you to be active in our discussion. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Jyrki Katainen and Mr. Aleksander Kwaśniewski, President of the Republic of Poland, former President obviously. So we have time until 20 to 5, so I strongly encourage you to listen to what is to be said. Let us start with this very special date, which is so significant, 26th of May, the date of European elections. This is a very special time, and many people treat it as a kind of a competition for the political forces in Poland. And I want to ask you why these elections is so important to us Europeans and Poles, what the European Parliament can do to European citizens.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank organizers for inviting me to this event. It's a great honor to be in the same event together with former President Aleksander Kwaśniewski, who is a very highly respected figure still amongst Europeans, not only because you took your country to the EU, but also because your contribution to solve common problems. So it's not only when country joins to the EU, it's not only to join for getting something or bringing own problems to the Union, but also to solve common problems and challenges. So very honored to be together with you in this panel. So to your question, what EP members, MEPs can do, I just try to give you a couple of concrete examples. If there is anybody of you who is interested in climate policy. So MEPs are the ones who create European-wide legislation for addressing climate change. You can do quite a lot in Poland, but Poland cannot do everything it could unless we have a European-wide legislation on climate change. Because if Finland and Poland and Sweden and Germany had different environmental or climate policies, then companies could select the country where obligations are lowest. And we wouldn't have a common European approach. Second thing, I've been working very much in promoting circular economy. For instance, how to improve plastic circulation or recycling. So if somebody's interested or thinks that it's important that plastic is consumed responsible manner and we can recycle plastics over and over again, then MEPs are the ones who can do the trick. You can try to do it in Poland, but it doesn't function as efficiently as it functions once we have a European-wide law. Maybe the third point is that MEPs are in charge of EU budget. So when my country joined the EU, I got immediately an opportunity to go Britain for Erasmus exchange. My family couldn't have afford me to send abroad. We had very good family, but my parents didn't have much money, so I wouldn't have chance to study abroad without EU. And I must say that I'm thankful for Erasmus program because it changed my life completely. So it opened up my mind, and I learned to think that the EU is my continent. There is no border whatsoever, and I can choose in which country I want to study or work. And I'm part of Europe. So those are just a few examples. And MEPs, by the way, my final point is that MEPs can be more influential than a national minister. I have been a national minister, and I know what I'm saying. So if Danuta or Mihail, for instance, if you are rapporteurs on certain law, your contribution may change things in entire Europe. So one MEP can influence to 500 million people's life, whereas national minister can influence to the life of its own citizens.
Po pierwsze, Jyrki, dziękuję za miłe słowa i też dziękuję Tobie, że jesteś takim zaangażowanym.
Thank you so much, Jyrki, for being such an engaged, such an involved European. I appreciate your efforts. So let me answer this question about the meaning of the 26th of May and the election. I'll do it more broadly, and I'll try to make a bigger splash. So do you remember President Clinton, when he had his electoral campaign, he was saying it's about economy, stupid. If I were to propose something similar, I would say the 21st century stupid. So we need to realize all the new conditions, circumstances in which we are while we're making this decision about our own fate. Without getting into details, think about technological changes. Technology progresses very rapidly, and it's irreversible. There's no escape from artificial intelligence or robotics or all the other phenomena that's being brought about by technology, that are being brought about by technology. In many countries will find it separate countries will find it difficult to adapt. As the European Union, it will not be easy, but it'll be easier to adapt. Jyrki mentioned things like climate change, right? Still, we're dealing with consequences and ramifications of the great crisis, social inequalities, unemployment. So no country alone will be able to deal with this or these problems. And we, in our country, were vastly different than we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had thought that liberal democracy and democracy had a bright future ahead of itself and that it was unstoppable. But today, liberal democracy has very strong and serious opponents. In Beijing, there is an ideological alternative, like free market and centralized policy. It's happening in Turkey, quite close, in Hungary as well, a little bit of it in Poland. So today, Democrats across Europe cannot sleep easily at night, and foundations of our democracy are safe. That things have already been figured out, and we simply continue. No, we have to fight against populists, nationalists, people who are for authoritarian political regimes. So, in short words, in 2019, as opposed to 10 to 15 years ago, we do have a true debate, a true fight that's going on. Real alternatives, real dangers, tough challenges. Therefore, 2019 is an important year. It's even more important and tougher than what we dealt with 5 years ago. That's why it's so important to get all the pro-European voters and all the pro-European forces to consolidate them on that day, preferably several days before that, to sort of wake up from this lull of, and this false sense of safety and security, like nothing would happen. Things can happen, bad things can happen, many of them. That's why it's important on the 26th of May in Poland, but not only in Poland, for voters to mobilize, go and cast votes for those who are going to give us more of the pro-European perspective. I myself, I'm an optimist, and I truly believe that we're going to prevail in this battle, even assuming that the European Parliament will have more, not only Eurosceptics, but Euro opponents. There will be some, and they won't be hiding their views. But I hope that Euro enthusiasts or Euro optimists will be more, I hope, over 60% in the European Parliament. And I think it's enough to create European institutions, to staff them, and to make sure that Europe is a place that understands that it's the 21st century, stupid. Challenges that we can only overcome when we stand together today, or competition against the Chinese, the Americans, the Russians. It can only happen when we stand together. If we allow things to disintegrate, I don't want to get into too many details, but if you think, like some people are saying, let's do more national countries rather than a united front. So it's just like if you get lost on your way, it's not like you can go home and start again. You have to find your way from where you are. So today, an alternative for Europe, unified Europe, that's a competitive partner for China or for the States. An alternative is not like a Europe of national states, no, it's more like a disintegrated Europe with national egoisms coming into play, where true, serious European conflicts can erupt. Someone might say it's impossible, but the 20th century is an amazing example of how Europe is a champion, is a master of national egoisms. Europe actually has led to problems that are absolutely unimaginable. So think about it. Here in Poland, in the city of Warsaw, that's a great example of what can go wrong. So saying yes to Europe, mobilizing, getting activated, knowing that this election is more important, more relevant than it was before. It's more well, I know that I'm speaking to people who are of like minds, but I hope that because it's being streamed, other people will see it as well and will hear it as well. Our only chance is a joint common Europe. We had dreamt about it at one point. Now we are in the European Union, and just like Mr. Trzaskowski said, it's a success story, truly. It cannot go to waste, but just not letting it go to waste is too defensive. We have to defend it and develop it and grow it. Very important words indeed. Thank you. Thank you for saying this, especially that you're saying this today on the anniversary of the European Coal and Steel Community, the 9th of May. And at the same time as we speak, in many cities of Europe, European dialogues are being held. So it's amazing to have you all here. Maybe CB in Romania, they have more prestige, let's say, than we're enjoying right now here in Europe. European heads of governments are meeting there, but we're pretty big too. So the question is about the condition of the European Union today. What do you think, gentlemen?
Well, I have three ways to look at Europe today. The first one is that Europe will be more integrated than it has ever been in 2 years' time, simply because when all the laws which the MEPs have adopted have been implemented in Poland and in other member states, it will automatically lead to more integrated Europe. I give you just a couple of examples. We have new policies in EU defense and security. We have new waste legislation. We have new laws in improving capital markets in Europe. We have new climate laws, etc. Just, I mean, random examples. This will automatically lead to more integrated Europe. And this is a result of demand. Demand from governments, from our citizens, from our companies. So they have said that we have a problem that it can be solved in national level, it should be solved in European level. And then we have made a legislative proposal which has been adopted by Parliament and Member States. So our European citizens and governments are using the EU for the purpose it has been created for. Second thing, we are challenged from outside more fiercely than for decades. The United States is challenging us to a certain extent, we all know. China is also challenging us, as President mentioned, and Russia. Russia has interfered to our national democratic processes, elections, by financing extreme political groups or using social media for dividing nations. And the question is, do we understand that and are we strong enough to defend our own interests, defend our legitimate economic and political interests? Because we are challenged from outside. Actually, it's quite interesting to recognize that we are first time in a situation where the presidents of the United States and Russia shares the view on Europe. The weaker, the more fragmented, the better. Because in their mind, the weaker we are, the stronger they are. So this is the time to defend our own interests. And finally, the third way to look at Europe is that, and this is probably the biggest threat which we are facing at the moment. We are out of the sudden situation where we have political leaders who seems to contest the fundamental values of ours. The values mentioned in the accession treaty, like rule of law, which means free judiciary, for instance, democracy, human rights, human dignity, freedom of press, etc. So those are the values which this country, this nation has been fighting for several times. And it's the basis for everything the EU is doing. Because can you imagine, we cannot have single market without trusting national judiciary. Because every single judge in the EU, in every single member state are EU judges. Because they are interpreting the EU law. And the interpretation must be same everywhere. Just to give you one example. So, so that's why I find it very, very problematic that some of our political leaders in some member states have started to contest our fundamental values, liberal democracy. So those are the 3 points. In one way, integration is moving forward because there is a clear demand. We are challenged from outside and we have to defend our interests, but also we have to make sure that the value basis will maintain strong in all the member states, otherwise we cannot trust and rely on each other.
Prezydencie, pan już w dużej mierze też przedstawił swoje argumenty.
Right. You actually mentioned many of the arguments in what you said before. I'll be very brief. No, I don't mean that. But let me give you some framework maybe. Our Europe is different than it was 15 years ago. We as Poland are a different member state than we used to be before. Higher economic growth and everything. So think about the role of Poland in the coming 10 years. What's our role? Well, just let me briefly answer the previous question, because I actually agree totally with what Jyrki said. And the role of Poland within the next 10 years, it's different, yet the same, in the sense that we need continuity, especially in the context of European values. Circumstances change, our environment change, things change around us. And if I were to tell you about the condition of the European Union today, it's not as good as I had dreamt 15 years ago, as we had been accessing the European Union, but it's much, much better than what Putin or Trump are saying when they imagine the future of the European Union. A number of times I have talked to Mr. Putin, and the problem is that since the fall of Soviet Union, they believe that anything that's called union has to collapse. And it is a mistaken and a misconstrued belief, but this is what they believe. Anything that is a soyuz, that is a union, has to fall. That's what they believe. But anyway, the European Union has no reason to fall, even though it's in a tougher spot than when it was back in the day, in the period of big enthusiasm, like in the beginning, at the turn of the century. If we hadn't had that huge enthusiasm, then we wouldn't have had this big bang, 10 newcomers, and then Bulgaria and then Romania joining, right? It wouldn't have been possible, sure. Indeed, fortunately for us, and of course, thanks to our contribution, we were a glowing example of you can do it. And yes, we are now part of this enlarged European Union. I know that enlargement has many critics. The enlargement has many critics, but I remember it was, I think it was a very important decision, a historic decision, and just like introducing the euro, right? Even though there are many voices of criticism, still, this decision actually saved Europe many real conflicts in the following years. And then we had this financial crisis. We dealt with it the way we did, some well, some not, Greece, Portugal, Spain, and so on. Then Brexit became a problem. And indeed, Brexit is a little bit of an ulcer that is self-inflicted in a way. It wasn't unavoidable, let's say. And it's the first time in history the state's administration, or at least the president of the US, is skeptical, is expressing skepticism towards the European Union, right? It's, well, maybe we can hope that Trump is going to lose the next election. I was recently in Washington. He could be re-elected. There is a real chance of that. So there are some years ahead of us, working with American administration that doesn't really comprehend the European Union, doesn't really like it. When it comes to China, of course, as they are trying to become a superpower, the European Union is a problem to them, sure, and they try to figure it out with any methods they deem fit. So we have some unseized opportunities, some errors and mistakes. Madam Moderator, you might be very interested to hear that. I believe that the European Union has been making a big mistake in communicating, embracing its voters. Lack of communication, because we have a lot of things, like Jyrki was saying, a lot of things and ideas that are genuinely good, but they are not being communicated. Well, but civil dialogue and all that? Well, yeah, the idea itself is great, and things are changing for better, sure. But, well, the question is, what do we do? And I think that the next Commission will have to think about that, using the latest technology to get in touch with voters. How can you be in the world of politics in the 21st century, stupid, without embracing and taking advantage of new technology? So, let me stop with this question, and let me start with talking about the role of Poland. Poland is a great beneficiary of the European Union, and there's no doubt about that. At the same time, Poland is facing a certain paradox. 80-something% supports the European Union, but still we have a government that is, mildly speaking, Eurosceptical, putting it really mildly. This dilemma may be solved in the coming European election and in our Polish national election come fall, where we can go back to a government that understands and is Euro enthusiastic and understands how this nation is very Euro-optimistic. Poland should continue to benefit from being in the European Union financially, from the point of view of security, but also Poland has to get back to respecting very fundamental values like independent courts, public mass media being objective. This is terrible what's going on this front in Poland. And Poland has to be, again, sitting at the table where big decisions for the European Union are made. There's no reason for Poland to be left on the fringes of the decision-making process. If Brexit becomes a fact, it's not certain, but it could be, Poland still should be in the mainstream of political decisions. But for that, we need the will coming from the Polish government. But still, all is in your hands, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, beautifully said.
So we are looking into the future right now. We have talked about the challenges, European elections, and now let us move back. Let us look at 15 years ago. I do not know if you know it, but there is one thing that our guests have in common. When Finland entered the European Union, it was 1995, and it was time when you were elected the president of Poland. So this is the common point. So let us look back and how do you recall this time? Me, as a student of European College, I have something in common with Mr. Trzaskowski as well. I couldn't even dream that we would live the European dream in Poland in such a beautiful way, that Poland would flourish on the European arena and that Europe would go in the direction it is right now. So here I mean Brexit. Could you imagine Brexit 15 years ago?
So you mean what has happened since Finland joined? So,
that was my question.
Yeah. So I already mentioned that in very concrete terms, me and my generation were the first who got an opportunity to benefit from Erasmus exchange program, and you cannot underestimate the value of it. Can you imagine how significant investment it is to human capital? Now Commission has proposed to double the means of Erasmus+, meaning that 12 million Europeans would have a chance to study or make internship in other EU countries. So huge investment to people's human capital. So this was a very concrete thing what I first realized. But then from the country point of view, of course single market is the overwhelming biggest thing which has benefited the country a lot. Finland is open economy, small open economy, and deeply dependent on international market. And after all, our country had unlimited access to European market, and it has had a big impact to our welfare society. Third point I would like to make is that in the very same or next day after joining, the country's power and influence increased exponentially. We had never been in a position to influence the direction of Europe or the life or policies of other countries. So Poland is a big country, but my country is a small country, but I still believe that even for a big country like Poland, being around the same negotiation table and decision-making process where the rest of Europe is, it increases your power. So it's very clear. Then if I just would say some human points, I have much more Polish friends than I would have had if my country wouldn't been in the EU. So it has just enabled to meet more Poles because we have been working in the same environment, and it has led to the situation where I understand much more Poland than would be the case otherwise. And this is just one example. I have lots of friends everywhere, but it's the way to to live in the same continent. There are more neighbors, natural neighbors. You don't need to ask a permission to go to your neighbors because we are in the same family. Also, to me, being part of the EU means that it's us. For instance, when I'm abroad, meaning somewhere else than in the EU, if I meet Polish person or French or Portugal, it's like us rather than what Poles are thinking about. It's us versus the others. And I don't mean here that we should build walls between us and the United States or India or China, but for me it's very important to feel that we are together. So the EU has given to my compatriots, such as the other EU citizens, unlimited freedom in our continent. And it's very, very important value. I tell you from my own experiences, one last thing. I used to be a prime minister of my country, and we had meetings, European Council meetings, once a month. And I have lots of family friends from these environments. So can you imagine any other continent where 28 leaders, such as their citizens, have so lively connection with each other? They know them, they are friends, they know their kids, they know their stories. So it's a big achievement what we have created. And very final point, I don't know any other continent in the world where citizens are deliberately financing the life and development of other countries. Of course, people are always, you are complaining your taxation most probably, so you may say that it's not deliberate choice to pay taxes. It's true, but we have agreed amongst ourselves, amongst 28 countries, that we want to help the other countries to develop because it's in the interest of us all. And this is something very unique. So that's why the EU is worth defending, worth further developing. There will not be a year without some sort of problems, but there are problems also in China and the United States, in everywhere. But we are here, 28, after all 27, to solve the joint problems. And that's why we have to pay attention to the future of our continent.
Ladies and gentlemen, I absolutely agree. I have not much to add even. This human aspect of the EU and the fact that in Europe not only political leaders but also students, tourists can get together, can meet one another is an enormous value. It is something that should build the infrastructure for understanding and for security. We will not fight one another, we will not be in conflict, because we are friends, we are neighbors, we know our lives. And what is a threat to the dialogue and understanding in the EU, especially when we talk about young people, is the fact that 15 years in Poland, for example, 24 years for Finland. So the young generation, it is like forever. And for young people in Poland, EU has always been present for them. Obviously, we remember how it was in the past, especially me. I believe I'm the eldest person here, so we need to remember. We need to remember our history, our past. I have met many young people who take for granted open borders, Erasmus, or access to studies or work abroad, or social security, They take all these elements for granted and they don't remember the past. So let me remind you. Since 73, I was a student. 1973, it was a good time in Poland. It was Gierek who was in power. We could even travel abroad, and we could buy $120. And they hardly believe me when I tell them that this was my experience. And obviously there was a problem with visa. To get a visa, it was extremely difficult because the majority of Western countries believed that Poland would like to come to them in order to work, not to be a tourist or a student. So the only countries who did not require visas was Sweden, Austria, and Norway. So in 75, I visited one of these countries. In 74, I wanted to go to Great Britain, and I needed to apply for a British visa, which was extremely sophisticated, and then transit visa for Germany, which was a bit less complicated because it took 1 day to get a visa, German visa. So in the morning you just submitted your documents, and in the afternoon the embassy was in Katowicka Street in Saska Kępa, a little building. So there was a little roof near the entrance. So near 4 p.m. There was an official from the embassy with a big basket and passports in this basket, and then a crowd of people waiting for visa was in front of this entry. So this German official read the Polish names, which make the situation even peculiar. So you just raised your hand, and you was very happy, and he just threw the passports to them from this roof, and the lucky one who got the passport was really happy that they could go abroad. But when I talk to people now, they say, well, it is so humiliating. Yes, it was humiliating, but this was the reality of 1970s. Today, you cannot imagine even that. And so this is the path that we walked, and this is our story, and this is the history we prepared for young people. Now we have a new German embassy, which is a nice big building. So a lot of things have changed, but there is no more humiliating situations, no more humiliating controls. So in order to go anywhere, you really needed to make a lot of effort. So when I tell that to my daughter, I said, yeah, my old dad, he tells his old stories, and it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because it is not granted for us. It is not forever. If the EU makes a mistake, if we do not have Schengen, we'll return to that. The British are very close to that, to reintroduction of border controls. So in 74, I got a British visa, and now I can tell you today, I did work illegally in Britain. But it was not that great all the time, because let me tell you that it is, so when the expansion was a fact in 2004, there was some surveys made, and both member states and candidate states were quite fearful of the expansion, and people thought that there were more threats than benefits, and what is interesting, Finns were the most apprehensive about the situation. Well, if you let me intervene here. Yeah, there were fears and apprehension. In Poland, apart from the conservative part of the Catholic Church, which demonstrated against the referendum, also farmers feared the EU entry, and the leader of this farmers' protest was Andrzej Lepe, the late Andrzej Lepe. I talked to him about it on several occasions, and he was just impossible to be convinced. He said it would be a catastrophe. So I traveled around Poland. Danuta Hibner was witness to these travels. I was assisted by Mrs. Małysz, and we were telling the farmers that it was going to be great. And then voted, the outcome was not that great, but still it was not a catastrophe. And when we were in the EU, and they got the direct subsidies, and the first group was just selected at random. It was a few thousand farmers who would be given subsidies. And who was in this group? Andrzej Leper. And he had quite a big farm. And when I met him, I asked him, well, you are such a strong opponent of the EU, so I believe you will not take the subsidy. Well, the decision has been made. I just accept the decision. I take the money. And apparently, it was not Poland flooded with foreign produce, but Polish produce appeared very successful in Poland. And thanks to the subsidies, Polish countryside has changed totally. When you look at the investments in silos and processing plants, it is really amazing. This is a great progress. So I believe the biggest problem with Polish farmers today would be when the EU decides to reform common agriculture policy. Then we will have a problem, because EU has a big asset. It convinces people not only with words but with acts, and as long as it does it, it will be successful. But today Poland is one of the most pro-European countries in the EU. So let us come back to this question: why Finns were so skeptical about the expansion, and how does it look like today?
So Finns and some other countries were skeptical because of two things mostly. The first one was money. How much more taxpayers should pay when structural funds and agricultural subsidies are expanded to new countries. It was a matter of concern. And the second point was that countries were skeptical whether new member states are ready to join. So if the legal structure, legal system is robust enough, if judiciary functions efficiently and according to principles which were set in our treaties, and things like that. So, and in some countries there were doubts or concerns whether people comes to our labor market. So those were quite understandable concerns. But people did not, for instance, in Finnish case, our labor unions were deeply worried about the Estonians' expansion to our labor market. But later on we have thanked Estonian labor force, because Finland's economic growth would have been much poorer without hard-working Estonians. So it was quite difficult puzzle, because you need to believe in certain development, so that free movement of people is good from economic point of view, helping the other member states to grow by subsidizing partially the economies helps our businesses to expand their operations to those countries, and the overall economic logic is positive. But of course there were lots of unknowns, and that's why some people were skeptical. Then another issue was geopolitics. It was mostly easy to understand that if we let Central and Eastern European countries to integrate us, it will strengthen Europe, and Central and Eastern European countries will become again as part of democratic Europe, rather than looking at other options around. So that was the easiest thing to understand. But now, after these experiences, I think we can say that enlargement was a very good thing. It has not stopped all the problems. We still have some issues with some member states, but we would have had bigger problems without enlargement.
Bardzo panom dziękuję za refleksję, za podzielenie się z nami swoimi doświadczeniami. Teraz czekamy na pytania z sali. Bardzo proszę.
Bardzo dziękuję. Maciej Gorazdowski, Uniwersytet Warszawski.
Maciej Gorazdowski, University of Warsaw.
Bardzo dziękuję
Thank you so
panom
much
prelegentom i pani moderatorce za te uwagi.
for your
Ja chciałbym
comments.
tylko podkreślić, że
I would like to
musimy
emphasize
pamiętać o
the
tym, że
fact
Unia
that
Europejska jest
we
nośnikiem
need to
wartości
remember that
demokratycznych.
EU is about democratic values.
Polska demokracja,
And although
kształtująca się
Polish
nie tak
democracy
dawno, jak wiemy, przyniosła
is
nam,
quite
my
young.
sobie sami przynieśliśmy wybory 4 czerwca 1989
So
roku.
we
To
remember
rzeczywiście
the
naszym
elections of the
sukcesem,
4th
ale
of
od tego
June
czasu
of 1989, the first free
poczyniła,
elections in
za
Poland. But
sprawą
since
Unii
then,
Europejskiej,
and thanks to the EU,
dokonała
Poland
również,
has made great
wielkiego
progress.
postępu. I ważna jest kwestia taka, że oprócz
And it is important to
zapewnienia
remember that
samym
apart
sobie
from
udziału w demokratycznym procesie wyborczym,
participation
jest to,
in the
żebyśmy wciąż
democratic
pamiętali o
elective
tym, że,
process, we need to
to
remember
również my sami
and bear in
zapewnimy
mind
sobie
that
instytucje
we
demokratyczne,
are
które
the founders
ten
or
proces wyborczy pozwalają nam
we
tworzyć.
vote for the
Ja tylko podam,
institutions,
taki przykład
European
z własnego
institutions.
doświadczenia.
So let me quote an example from my own experience. It was only in 2018, because of the reform of the electoral system,
zostało umożliwione uczestnictwo bezpartyjnych członków komisji wyborczych w
partisan
obozowych komisjach wyborczych.
committees
I to
could
dopiero
present
w
their
2018
candidates.
nie do
So
pomyślenia,
the
jeżeli
committees
porównamy to
not affiliated with any
z
parties
tym,
could
od
present
jak
their
dawna
candidates
polska demokracja
only
się
in
rozwija. To świadczy
2018.
tylko o tym, że
So and this
wciąż
proves
my,
that
obywatele,
we
musimy
as
również pamiętać
citizens
o tym,
need
żeby
to remember
na te
that
instytucje, które demokrację nam zapewniają,
we
żeby
need
zwracać
to
uwagę.
pay very special attention to the institutions which provide democracy to us.
W zasadzie nie było to pytanie o co.
Well, it was not a question, in fact, but it was just a comment from me, which I believe is important. This is the reflection I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Może zbierzemy jeszcze jedno pytanie.
So now let's take one more.
Dzień dobry, Agnieszka
Good
Wąż,
afternoon,
Koalicja
Agnieszka Wąż,
Ja mam
the
pytanie właściwie do
Youth
panów.
Voice Coalition. Mr. Katainen talked about Erasmus, mentioned it a number of times. I'm sure that it is initiative of great value and it's great experience, but it's not available to everyone. What to do about people from smaller localities, villages, who don't have access to universities, or they choose trade schools or vocational schools? So how to make sure that high schoolers and people from trade schools also have access to it?
That's a very good point. That's a very important issue. So, as I said, Commission has proposed to double the means of Erasmus, meaning that 12 million Europeans would have an access to student exchange, but also internships, or adults already in profession, like teachers, can go to another country for half a year or for a year to work in other schools, because you can learn from this. I have wanted, and my colleagues in Commission has wanted, to encourage vocational students to use Erasmus much more. So my personal priority is to increase a number of vocational students and teachers participating to Erasmus, because teachers are so important. The quality of teacher correlates with the quality of education, and it correlates with the competitiveness and economic growth. So that's why I would like to encourage our teachers who are already in profession to use Erasmus exchange, because you for sure will learn something. I mean, the language or cultures, or learn from how people are living in different cultures, like everybody. So university students uses Erasmus already well. But more emphasis should be put for professionals, I mean, painters, plumbers, technicians, nurses, and then people who are working with young people, like teachers.
Bardzo prosimy.
Hello, Piotr Kaczyński. I'm a member of Team Europe here in Warsaw. I have a question which is the following, because you mentioned that there's a problem of communication. According to Eurobarometer in 2014, 37% of Europeans have never crossed the national border. 52% of Polish citizens have never crossed the border of Poland. So my question is how to communicate Europe to them if most of the activities of the European Commission and European institutions is basically focused on transnational dilemmas and problems. They are equally Europeans. They also vote in European elections.
Thanks for your question. Indeed, for instance, when I've been talking about Erasmus, it's about going to study or work in another country. But let me give you a couple of examples which affects to everybody's life and where EU is the most relevant actor. The first one is food security. So the food you are eating every day, it's regulated or it must follow the EU regulation. EU's food safety standards are the highest in the world. And the other markets are following us. Because if you reach the EU standard, then it's the best in the world. The second thing is animal health and medical safety. So in both in animal health and in medical safety, Europe is a superpower. So we set standards for all of those. So it impacts to all and in everyday life. Those are just few examples that you doesn't need to be international yourself, meaning that if you're not interested or there's no need to go abroad, but you benefit from our legislation making power in various ways. Final point, which has been on my desk recently, is to deepen the security cooperation between the member states and defense cooperation. So we have, and our member states have recognized that, for instance, cyber attacks which may cut electricity or poison water or then classified information is leaked to wrong hands. Those are challenges which cannot be addressed alone, or at least it's significantly more difficult. So there again, EU creates added value, even the people who doesn't want or there's no reason to be international as such.
Ja nie wiem, czy Piotr, czy ty masz wiedzę na temat powodów, jakie stoją za takim wysokim odsetkiem osób, które nie przekraczają granic, ale myślę, że można powiązać to też z niskimi dochodami, prawda? Czy brakiem ciekawości po prostu Unią Europejską? Złożone.
Tylko ja pozwolę sobie wyrazić pewną wątpliwość. Raz, że to są badania z 2014 roku, jak pan powiedział, tak? No, minęło 5 lat, więc myślę, że to wygląda trochę inaczej. Mówiąc szczerze, nie za bardzo, aż mi się chce wierzyć w te dane, zarówno polskie, jak i europejskie, ale niezależnie od tego chcę powiedzieć, że gdyby spojrzeć na inne miejsca w świecie, to i tak jest to najwyższy poziom internacjonalizacji, jaki możemy sobie wyobrazić. Tego nie ma ani w Stanach Zjednoczonych, gdzie podróżujących poza granicę jest dużo mniej, ani w Chinach, mimo wielkiego boomu turystycznego, no ale 1,3 miliarda Chińczyków, to może lepiej, że tak od razu wszyscy nie zaczęli podróżować. Więc to ciągle jest bardzo wysoki poziom jednak internacjonalizacji i wydaje mi się, że on dzisiaj w 2019 roku jest inny niż 5 lat temu.
O, jest kolejne pytanie.
Tomasz Kowalczuk, Uniwersytet Warszawski. Ja po pierwsze chciałem, panie prezydencie, powiedzieć, że staliśmy w tej samej kolejce na Katowickiej. To jest jedna rzecz. Druga rzecz, jeśli już tak wspominam, to drugi obraz to jest taki obraz.
That's one image from my past. Another image from flashback from my past was on the Dutch-Belgian border in the 80s, and they were saying there was a speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour. So think about the difference or the border between East and West Berlin, and where there were dogs and all sorts of security measures. And, you know, if you compare these things, you know, you see how things have changed over the recent years. But that's it. I would like to remind you what Donald Tusk said in his lecture at our university. He said that Europe had no large states, only countries that thought they were big, they were large. And I think we might be suffering from a dictatorship of those large states, big states. So in the context of what Donald Tusk said, could you comment on that? So, like, do you, as a representative of a small country, you know, with all due respect, do you feel that it's a threat, or do you feel very sort of safe in Europe that has plenty of big and small and even smaller states?
I give you a concrete example. When I still was finance minister, I had a chance to participate in Eurogroup meetings. And in Eurogroup, all the countries have one voice, or one vote. So if I had different opinion with Germany, my German counterpart had as much power as I had. We never voted, but in principle, it was an undemocratic situation. And undemocratic, I would say, in positive sense. So I think the EU forces member states to take into account other countries' interests, because if you do only what you want or what is good for you without recognizing the sensitivities of other member states or special circumstances of other member states, then in the next time around you don't have friends anymore. So this is the beauty of the EU. Also, one concrete issue which also has belonged to my responsibilities is trade policy. We just signed a trade agreement between the EU and Japan, and I cannot imagine any country, even Germany or France, to be in a situation to negotiate as good agreement with Japan as we managed to agree, because we are representing 500 million people. We are representing the market, which is 500 million consumers. And Germany would have been negotiating on behalf of 80 million. So this economy of size matters in many issues. So in one hand, we need to take into account each other's interests and try to find compromises. And on the other hand, we can use the economy of size.
Ja myślę, że oczywiście mamy różne kraje.
I think that indeed, among the 28 EU member states, we have different countries with different sizes, and that goes without saying, but I look at it differently. No single European member state, including such giants as Germany, could not be alone, standing any chance in terms of competing alone, you know, with the States, with China, because if you look at those 28 countries, when you look at our common GDP, you know, the largest growth, education, health, well, as the European Union, we have plenty strengths. I cannot, of course, or I'm not trying to interpret what Donald Tusk was saying on that very day that you referred to, but given the fact that I know Donald Tusk as a person, and I know his thinking, and I know that he can be sometimes, well, that probably when he talked about big countries who are dictating certain things, we're talking about countries that we all know about, countries that feel that are big sometimes, but they may not always be so big. Maybe he meant our country, maybe he meant Poland. Like today, Poland is trying to distance itself from the mainstream. I think it's making a mistake. We're not as big as we think. We never will be. Our place in the European Union, I'm not even mentioning Finland. For Finland, it was like, we can now influence European politics, and given the geography and so on, it was simply a big chance, something big. But we, even though we are more centrally located, even though we have 40 million population, still we're not a powerhouse in Europe. I would like to thank In Europa for this meeting, and I would like to refer to what both of you said, gentlemen, about communication. All of us find it painful that our relationship with the States is not the best, let's say, and I believe that we owe it to the style in Washington, but not only. I would say that probably you will agree that Europe needs the States as much as the States need Europe. And if the European Union or the States are in trouble, the only alliance that we can rely on is NATO. And I'd say that when I was in the States, at least, a lot of people in the States, including political elites, have no idea about the European Union, have no knowledge of it at all, and those who do have some knowledge, they still think that it's a bit of a silly attempt to copy the States. But as you know, of course, the States are exceptional, and you cannot copy it, so if you're trying to copy it, you're sure going to fall. So, but actually, we haven't done anything, or at least nothing that I would notice, to communicate with and to liaise with Americans what the European Union is, how the European Union is important for their security. It is important. I talked about it at length with the then President of the European Parliament, Mr. Schulz, and he agreed with me that that's what we're lacking, what we're missing. Communication, any form of communication, trying to explain things, but not to talk to their administration. But you know, Dallas and Oregon and California and the state of Washington, you know, sort of communicating what we are as the European Union, what we have to offer, what friends we have, and that maybe we can do something together, so that if someone attempts to drive a wedge between us and the States, those attempts shouldn't be as successful as they are if we communicate.
Indeed, the United States is our sister and brother, even though the current relationship is not the easiest one. Yeah. So, I mean, we share the same value basis and the way to look at the world, even though, having said this, I always must answer the next question, what values? And do we really share the view to look at the world? Well, currently we have problems with in this respect. But when you go a little bit deeper, then we share the same values, and so this is very important to recognize and also communicate to our own citizens that we have a special relationship with the Americans, and we have to maintain it. It's not only about our own security, but also because of our own security, but it's also economical, cultural, historical link which deserves to be maintained. So you may be right that the communication could be better. A few years back, the administration knew quite well what the EU was about. Now they are not that interested, or at least in this certain level. There are still lots of politicians in both houses of the Congress who knows EU quite well. But you may be right that the average citizen or some decision makers in various states don't have a clue what the EU is all about. I don't know how much resources we should use for advertising what the EU is about. I mean, the main thing is that the decision makers in the United States understand what we are and what are our power and wants to cooperate with us.
Można, panie ambasadorze, ja w tej kwestii jestem trochę bardziej
Mr.
pesymistyczny.
Ambassador, I'm a bit of a pessimist here because I believe that we in Europe have to realize that even though we have the same origin, in the sense that the United States of America are a reflection of what had been going on in Europe. But still, things are changing. If you look at the structure of American society, you can see that descendants of Europe, there's fewer and fewer of them, and their sense of identity is different. Their sense of identity is not as strong as it was like even 3 generations back. The States are developing these days thanks to migration from Latin America, European origin or European, let's say, heritage, but from really ancient years. And of course, next generations coming from Japan, from Korea, from various corners of Asia, and they will play a bigger role. So American social structure is generally becoming less European, more global. And what I'm noticing is that there is a retreat from this Euro-Atlantic philosophy. And it happened before Trump. Of course, what's happening now with Trump, it's more spectacular, but the beginning of a lesser understanding of the Euro-Atlantic meaning, it started before that. For Obama, definitely the Pacific region was even more natural than the Atlantic region. And I'm not saying that's to blame President Obama, but this is natural. And it's something that's, I guess, irreversible. Of course, it should force us to be more active in terms of informing the society, getting young people opportunities to come to Europe and to study here, sure. But still, I think that things have taken a different course anyway. And the European Union has to ask itself a different question. Of course, it should still continue to nourish the Euro-Atlantic line, sort of, not getting into conflict with the States, because then only China and Russia would win. But still, while caring about Euro-Atlantic relations, increasing European integration. Sooner or later, we'll have to say that the American umbrella that NATO gives us is not enough. We should have some European, purely European instruments in hand, governed by European structures. European intelligence services and forces have to collaborate better. What Juncker was saying, we should also bet on our own defense industry, because now we are making several kinds of tanks and vehicles and choppers for the military and so on. We are making these. It's diversity, but it could be creating systems that are not very compatible. But if everything was compatible, then we would be in a stronger position under attack. So as much as we love the States, as much as we respect our common origin and so on, also I'm always trying to build good relationships regardless of administration. We still have to know that it's time for us to take our own responsibility, to become more mature. And it can only happen when we're integrated, when we're united as the European Union, and when, if Brexit should happen, we still maintain good collaboration with Great Britain and maybe build some nice relationship with Ukraine. So it's a really important moment right now. The Parliament and the new Commission, everything that we're going to elect. Well, the dilemma is going to continue. We respect America, we love them, but we have to also start to play our own game.
Ja miałam tylko, panie prezydencie, taką refleksję, że być może napływ imigrantów w
maybe the influx of immigrants to Europe will bring us closer to American experience,
gdzieś nasze losy mogą łączyć.
because maybe we'll have a common experience. Well, this is a very difficult topic, very interesting one, and I think we'll lack time to discuss it. Migration is a fact, and this is an irreversible process.
Taki oto stan rzeczy, że nas jest 500 milionów.
So if there are 500 million Europeans together with United Kingdom, which is good news, because our society are living longer, so our societies are aging. So if you live until 100 in Poland, why not? If you are healthy and quite efficient. And if we have forecast that Africa, and especially North Africa, and which is immediate neighbor of Europe, it is not far away. So if we hear that Africa can double its population within 20 years, so until 2050, you can have 4 billion people there. So you cannot stop migration, but you have also be aware that it will cause a lot of tension. The best idea, Europe is a special continent which is very generous outside of its borders. So, for example, one of the most important programs implemented in the next 20 years will be the programs devoted to Africa, so educational programs. Education for girls, let me say it and be blunt, as far as birth control is concerned, you need education of women, first of all. This is a precondition. Then you need investments in Africa, and you need to make Africa a neighbor who will be self-sufficient and which would not produce more immigrants to Europe. But still, immigration will be rising because we are a great continent. I have also always said, why do they come to Europe, not to China, not to Russia? This is the answer. Yeah, the answer is quite clear. We are the dreamland. The promised land, not other continents or countries. So this is a big problem which will change or affect the social structure of Europe. And how to cope with it, I don't know. I know that you have your experience in protecting Europe, and you know a bit about Africa, but this is a big challenge that we'll be facing for years to come. We do not have answers for everything, but we still have more questions.
My name is Jan Szyszka. I work for COFI International Development in Europa, so also thank you very much for finding time for a very interesting discussion over here. And apologies for being monothematic, but I wanted to come back to the communications policy of the European Union. And I have a feeling that over the last few years, especially during the Juncker Commission, the EU has learned to communicate well to citizens in middle-sized to large cities in the EU. However, it completely misses the fact that there is also a significant proportion of European Union population living in villages or small towns where it doesn't reach out. And that's also the source of a lot of Euroscepticism and anti-EU feelings on the continent. And do you have ideas how to reach to those people and how to convince them and how to combat the anti-EU rhetoric that's present over there? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is my 60th Citizens Dialogue. And every single time somebody asks the same question. And it's about communication. And it's very understandable because normally in these kind of events, you are a little bit more interested in the EU than probably the average citizens, and you would like to convey the messages to everybody, and then everybody can take their position. So my usual answer is that I don't believe that EU institutions can ever be better communicators towards their citizens than the national politicians are. So I've been in national politics, and I remember the time when I gave my face to all bailout packages, which were very critical. Finns didn't like at all those economic bailout packages which were given to Portugal and Ireland and Greece, etc. And I decided at that time that I have to communicate extensively, and I encourage the other ministers and members of parliament to communicate clearly and discuss with our own citizens so that they know exactly why we are doing and what. And apart from this bailout package discussion, we wanted to communicate what else our government want to achieve in the EU. So we maintained people's support for the European project, even though they were highly critical towards bailout packages. So Commission has increased communicational efforts, and I think we do better than the previous commissions. But imagine me to go to the villages you mentioned. If I try to convince people on something, I think I'm not as credible as the local politicians or national politicians are. So that's why my message to the governments is that if you want, first of all, you are the owners of the EU. You have rights and obligations. You should tell to your own citizens, what do you expect from the EU? What are the things you are ready to fight for in the EU? And then there is a little chance that you can maintain and get support from people for your projects in the EU. So that's why we need a stronger national ownership. We need a stronger national political ownership, that Prime Minister and others tell directly to the people that those are the 5 points I want to achieve in the EU. Better security cooperation, more defense, circular economy, artificial intelligence, etc. So that was my point, so stronger national ownership.
Myślę, żeby poprawić komunikację.
In order to improve communication, and I strongly agree that you need to focus on this communication on the national level, but over the previous years there have been some problems with communication between the politicians and the electorate. And it was Barroso who said, you have the nationalization of the success of the European Union and the nationalization of the failure. So if something goes wrong, it's up to Brussels, and if something goes great, then it is up to us. So I do not believe that Eurosceptical governments will part with this idea, but the leaders who believe in the European Union and who believe in this ownership, they cannot use this argument. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I have to look at the time. And now we have time for briefing. Thank you very much, and please cast a vote in the next election. Thank you very much for your discussion. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank representative of European Commission to invite our speakers and for hosting this event. And now I would like to encourage you to read the report 15 years of the European Union of Poland in the European Union, and this report is available online on the website of In Europa. And thank you very much. I strongly encourage you to read this report. It's a very interesting read.